I thought what I'd do tonight is I'm going to read from the title chapter of the novel, The Gangster We're All Looking For. It's the first chapter that I wrote. The whole book began with this chapter, so I thought it would be good to go back to it. I usually don't read from it, and I've been doing a series of readings this month, and I thought I'll go back to it and read from this chapter. Also, because it's a chapter that I wrote one summer in 1994 in Northampton. So it's a locally generated piece of writing. Though no place around here appears in the book, I really feel that the book comes out of this region. There are scenes where I talk about, say, in the second chapter of the book, a bunch of boys jumping into a swimming pool in Southern California, and it's a swimming pool that eventually gets drained. Well, the image of the boys jumping actually comes from Leeds, where I would go swimming in the summers, and there was an area where some boys would jump off of an old railroad bridge down. So I'm just shuttling people from one side of the country into the other and into my book, taking great liberties because I write fiction. All right, so this is The Gangster We're All Looking For. I'll read through, and then we'll do a Q&A, okay? So, I'm sorry, I have a little tango going on with the microphone here. Vietnam is a black and white photograph of my grandparents sitting in bamboo chairs in their front courtyard. They are sitting tall and proud, surrounded by chickens and a rooster. Between their feet and the dirt of the courtyard are thin sandals. My grandfather's broad forehead is shining. So too are my grandmother's famous sad eyes. The animals are oblivious, pecking at the ground. This looks like a wedding portrait, though it is actually a photograph my grandparents had taken late in life for their children, especially for my mother. When I think of this portrait of my grandparents in their last years, I always envision a beginning. To or toward what, I don't know, but always a beginning. When my mother, a Catholic schoolgirl from the South, decided to marry my father, a Buddhist gangster from the North, her parents disowned her. This is in the photograph, though it is not visible to the eye. If it were, it would be a deep impression across the soft dirt of my grandparents' courtyard. Her father chased her out of the house, beating her with the same broom she had used every day of her life, from the time she could stand up and sweep, until that very morning that she was chased away. The year my mother met my father, there were several young men working at her parents' house, running errands for her father, pickling vegetables with her mother. It was understood by everyone that these men were courting my mother. My mother claims she had no such understanding. She treated these men as brothers, sometimes as uncles even, later exclaiming in self-defense, "I didn't even know about love then." Ma says love came to her in a dark movie theater. She doesn't remember what movie it was or why she'd gone to see it, only that she'd gone alone and found herself sitting beside him. In the dark, she couldn't make out his face, but noticed that his profile was handsome. She wondered if he knew she was watching him out of the corner of her eye, watching him without embarrassment or shame, watching him with a strange curiosity, a feeling that made her want to trace and retrace his silhouette with her fingertips until she'd memorized every feature and could call his face to mind in any dark place she passed through. Later, in the shadow of the beached fishing boats, on the blackest nights of the year, she would call him to mind, his face a warm companion for her body on the edge of the sea. In the early days of my parents' courtship, my mother told stories. She confessed elaborate dreams about the end of war, foods she'd eat, a banquet table, mangoes piled to the ceiling, songs she'd make up and sing, clapping her hands over her head and throwing her hair like a horse's mane. Dances she'd dance, hopping from one foot to the other. Unlike the responsible favorite daughter or sister she was to her family, with my father in the forest, my mother became reckless, drunk on her youth and the possibilities of love. Ignoring the chores to be done at home, she rolled her pants up to her knees, stuck her bare feet in puddles, and learned to smoke a cigarette. She tied a vermilion ribbon in her hair. She became moody. She did her chores as though they were favors to her family, forgetting that she ate the same rice, was dependent on the same supply of food. It seemed to her that the face that now stared back at her from deep inside the family well was the face of a woman she had never seen before. At night, she lay in bed and thought of his hands, the way his thumb flicked down on the lighter and brought fire to her cigarette. She began to wonder what the forests were like before the American planes had come, flying low, raining something onto the trees that left them bare and dying. She remembered her father had once described to her the smiling broadness of leaves, jungles thick in the tangle of rich soil. My first memory of my father's face is framed by the coiling barbed wire of a military camp in South Vietnam. My mother's voice crosses through the wire. She is whispering his name and with this utterance caressing him. Over and over she calls him to her. Anh Minh, Anh Minh. His name becomes a tree she presses her body against. The calling blows around them like a warm breeze, and when she utters her own name, it is the second half of a verse that began with his. She drops her name like a pebble into a well. She wants to be engulfed by him. Anh Minh, Anh Minh, me? The barbed wire gates open, and she crosses through to him. She arrives warm, the slightest film of sweat on her bare arms. To his disbelieving eyes, she says, it's me. Shy and formal and breathless, my parents are always meeting for the first time, savoring the sound of a name, marveling at the bones of the face cupped by the bones of the hand. I trail behind them, the tip of their dragon's tail. I am drawn along like a silken banner on the body of a kite. For a handful of pebbles and my father's sharp profile, my mother left home and never truly returned. Picture a handful of pebbles. Imagine the casual way he tossed them at her as she was walking home from school with her girlfriends. He did this because he liked her. Boys are dumb that way, my mother told me. A handful of pebbles to be thrown in anger, in desperation, in joy. My father threw them in love. Ma says they touched her like warm kisses, these pebbles he had been holding in the sun. Warm kisses on the curve of her back, sliding down the crook of her arm, grazing her ankles, and landing around her feet in the hot sand. I was born in the alley behind my grandparents' house. At 3 a.m, my mother dragged herself out of the bed in the smaller house where she and my father lived after they married. My father was away fighting in the war. Ma's youngest sister had come to live with her, helping her with my older brother, who was just a baby then. Ma left the two of them sleeping in the hammock, my brother lying in the crook of my aunt's arm, and set out alone. She cut a crooked line on the beach. Moving in jerky steps like a ball tossed on the waves, she seemed to be bounced along without direction. She walked to the schoolhouse and sat on the ground before it, leaning against the first step. She felt grains of sand pressing against her back. Each grain was a minute pinprick, and the pain grew and grew. Soon she felt as though her back would erupt, awash in blood. She thought, I'm going to bleed to death. She put her hands on her belly. We are going to die. In front of the schoolhouse lay a long metal tube. No one knew where it came from. It seemed to have been there always. Children hid inside it, crawled through it, spoke to each other from either ends of it, marched across it, sat upon it, and confided secrets beside it. There had been so little to play with during the school recess. This long metal tube became everything. A tarp was suspended over it to shield it from the sun. The tube looked like a blackened log in a room without walls. When the children sat in a line on the tube, their heads bobbing this way and that in conversation, it seemed they were sitting on a canopied raft. The night I was born, my mother, looking at the tube, imagined it to be the badly burnt arm of a dying giant buried in the sand. She could not decide whether he had been buried and was trying to get out, or whether he had tried to bury himself in the sand, but had failed to cover his arm in time. In time for what? She had heard a story about a girl in a neighboring town who was killed during a napalm bombing. The bombing happened on an especially hot night when this girl had walked to the beach to cool her feet in the water. They found her floating on the sea. The phosphorus from the napalm made her body glow like a lantern. In her mind, my mother built a canopy for this girl. She started to cry, thinking of the buried giant, the floating girl. These bodies stopped in mid-stride on their way somewhere. She began to walk toward the tube. She had a sudden urge to be inside it. The world felt dangerous to her, and she was alone. At the mouth of the tube, she bent down, her belly blocking the mouth. She tried the other side, the other mouth. Again, her belly stopped her. "But I remember," she muttered out loud, "as a girl I sometimes slept in here." This was what she wanted now, to sleep inside the tube. Ma says war is a bird with a broken wing, flying over the countryside, trailing blood and burying crops in sorrow. If something grows in spite of this, it is both a curse and a miracle. When I was born, she cried to know that it was war I was breathing in, and she could never shake it out of me. Ma says war makes it dangerous to breathe, though she knows you die if you don't. She says she could have thrown me against the wall until I broke or coughed up this war that is killing us all. She could have stomped on it in the dark and danced on it like a mad woman dancing on gravestones. She could have ground it down to powder and spat on it, but didn't I know? War has no beginning and no end. It crosses oceans like a splintered boat filled with people singing a sad song. Okay, I think I'd like to actually stop here and open it up for questions, and then I could go back and read a little bit more. It never occurred to me when I was writing it to name her. And I realized something. Are there any people in the room who speak Vietnamese? No. Okay, in Vietnamese, you only exist in relation to someone. Like you are someone's brother, or you are someone's child, or you are someone's niece, or, you know, even if you're not blood relations, you speak in this way. There is a formal I, which is not relational in that sense. But generally people don't, once they know somebody, they'll say, my brother, my sister, this or that. So you only exist in relation, there's that. There's also the thing about how she speaks names, you know, or there are people who speak to each other in this book, like the mother says to the father, she says the father's name, okay? And there's a way in which the names are spoken with great tenderness. I suppose no one speaks her name. She's telling the story. So if say the parents were to speak of her, they would call her child. They wouldn't call her by her name, they would call her child. So there's that too. I don't know if that makes sense. I mean, the reason why it never occurred to me as being a problem is, I guess, because of Vietnamese. And she would only say, I, so-and-so's child, Min's child, me's child. So there's that. There's also, I'm working on a trilogy, and she will be named in the second book. So I can't tell you what her name is. But she will have a name, because she's not the narrator of the second book. In terms of the structure of the novel, it starts out with the youngest voice, right? The first chapter is the youngest voice, and the voice ages. So as we move forward in time, the voice ages, darkens a bit. The form of the book is that the first two chapters get spun through the third chapter and emerge as the fourth and the fifth. So the third chapters are kind of, it's like an undertow. It's where things get churned up. And the reason why I say that is because the first chapter and the fourth chapter are primarily the father and the daughter. The mother and the brother are absent. The second chapter is the mother, the father, and the daughter, and the brother's there. Same with the fifth chapter. So you see, they're kind of looking at each other across a huge span of time. What happens in the third chapter, when the girl says, when I grow up, I'm going to be the gangster we're all looking for, is a kind of break in the sense that she no longer goes to the parents to tell her what to do or what's happened, or she's not going to them anymore for the explanations or the answers. She kind of sets out on her own. And in the fourth chapter, say, she looks back on the relationship with the father and tries to chart how it went wrong or where they split off, where they separated from each other. And in the fifth, she goes toward the body of the brother. So it is about maturity. It's about the voice that tells the story kind of takes this turn and then really looks again at things that are only half glimpsed in the beginning. So there's that. I think the relationship between the father and the daughter is a very important one in the book, in that they arrive in the country together. The girl, she's a child, but she can speak fluent English, say, so she kind of speaks for him in a sense. And these are role reversals of a huge magnitude, and they do affect his ability or his feeling in terms of what kind of man he's able to be, what kind of father he's able to be. And that's an enormous tension in this novel, but also I think in a lot of immigrant stories, period, where you have such an upheaval that everyone assumes a new role, but it's not always, it has its cost, I guess, yeah. And a lot of stories tend to focus more, say, on the relationship between the mother and the daughter. And I felt like this was an opportunity to explore one between a girl and a father, as the father loses, to some degree, his ability to be masculine in a way that he feels is important, and the girl assumes certain roles that are masculine within their family. I think a lot of why I write is because I had to translate as a child. And when you translate, you're doing the best that you can, but that it's not necessarily what the person would say if they could speak, if they could say it themselves. So you have a kind of awareness of many ways to say something, one, but also of the inadequacy of language in another sense. And that tension is something that I think informs my writing. Like, I know that language is what I work with, but on some level, I understand it's imperfect. It's an imperfect vessel for the thing that it's carrying, but it's the only one I have. So cobble it I must, right? So translation has a lot to do with why I write. Translating as a child has a lot to do with why I write. I think I also write because I want to write, I'm trying to write people into being. I mean, people who exist already, or stories that I feel are alive. But I think of language as a way to, it's like singing or something. It's a way to bring a song out into the world and let it travel. So, and once it goes, you have no idea where it goes or who picks it up. But it's tapping into a kind of primal energy, I think, which is the need to tell stories, the need to put something out that we gather around to help us look at our lives and say, who are we, where are we, why are we here, what are we doing, what have we done? So I think that's why I write. Also, when I was very young, I loved fairy tales, and I just loved them. I thought they were so magical. And I understood that words made fairy tales. I mean, I got that much because I would read them, so I understood that the words were making me go somewhere. And I loved going there, so, and I just wanted to hang out with that. It's definitely not like 50 Cent. It's not gangster rap, gangster. And I know a number of people have picked up the book being like, where, when does that come in? It is more like a figure, definitely. It's an idea and an ideal of somebody who could make it work, you know, who could come and solve something, even if it's not by the legitimate channels or, you know. So in a sense, the father was that figure in Vietnam. It's part of why the mother falls for him. He has a kind of, you know, a crooked, charismatic way of being, but he isn't that person in the U.S., you know. So that's part of how I see gangsters. It's that figure. You have your back against the wall. It's classic. It's like a cowboy, or it's like, you know, it's these ideas of just do what it takes to make it work. All right. And I think the father, in many ways, feels like he wants to be able to do that, and he can't in America for whatever reasons. But, you know, so he's looking for that gangster as much as anyone else is. And I like it because as a title, it's spoken by the girl, which is kind of, it's such an act of bravado. You know, when I grow up, I'm going to be the gangster we're all looking for. Like, you know, the adolescent girl saying this, kind of assuming that, saying, fine, okay, I'll do it. You know, so there are gender things there too. Yes, I do struggle. I think characters come to me and they are alive, and it's my job to make them alive for someone else. I don't have doubt. I don't feel any doubt about a character or about what they're telling me or about their right to be as a story. I don't have doubts about that. I have doubts about my own ability to lay it down just so. Yeah, and that's where the hard work comes in. In the second story in this book, Palm, I must have done about 50 drafts of that story. The first line that came to me in the story is the last line of the story. I stood in that small room and wept into the desert of my palms. The line came to me and I didn't know what it was about. I didn't know what, you know, I had a sense it was coming from a young girl, but I didn't know what would happen to make her end at this story, at this point. And I struggled with that story for a long time. I was trying to thread elements of an emerging sexuality, the way that she's physically haunted by the brother as she's coming into a sense of herself as a physical being. I wanted to explore ideas about water and the loss of water and what it means to the mother when the swimming pool is drained and paved over with cement, and how it triggers the girl's question about, well, where does water go when it goes away? Like, where do people go? Where does anything go when it goes away? And the mother says it goes into the sky or it goes into the ground. And the girl imagines this coin that gets tossed into the sky and never comes back down again. It doesn't make any sense to her, you know? So during the course of working on this, I thought, okay, this much I know. Slowly I come to know this about the girl. There's this enormous thirst in her to know, right? She's absorbing desert landscapes in a sense, right? She's absorbing a kind of parched world, a blasted world in a sense, and she's dreaming of water. She's dreaming of it. And how does she bring it to herself? Like by crying into her own hands. So it's, you know, it took a long time though, and I had to kind of tease out all of the possibilities of that line. I moved it from the end to the very beginning of the story, you know. At one point, when I was working on the other chapters, I thought, that's fine, I'll just take it out. I don't need it. I'll take it out. 4 stories, that's fine. Then I brought it back in because I wasn't done. It wasn't done with me. I wasn't done. And it just took a long time. It took a long time. So I do feel doubt, but I do what I tell my students to do, which is to go back to the initial impulse. Like, how did the character first come to you? What about this story? How did it first arrive? And what about its initial arrival? What about it made you follow it? And, to go back to that initial moment and kind of see all the richness in it, find the richness in it, is very important. Because those moments feed you as a writer. So I do work very hard. I work hard, and I think that that's why I love it. It feels like I'm worked by it. It's the only thing I do where at the end I feel like I gave everything and I still didn't get it right. And so I have to start all over again. I like it. I mean, some people I think would feel, what's the point, But for me, I feel like it's an opportunity to engage with trying to figure this out. Like, how do you make somebody, like in performance, how do you make this space, which is empty, seem to be full, right? And you do it by looking at it, by interacting with it. I mean, it happens immediately. The audience looks at this space because of how you're looking at the space. You use your body to do this, to extend it, to go over there. Whatever you want, you do it through your body. Likewise, when you go to the page, it can hold anything. And it demands so much. It demands everything and more. And it's the only thing I know in life that I have that kind of relationship with. And I prize it. So anyway, I'm working on my second book, so we'll see. We'll see if I'll rhapsodize next time we meet. All right, back to the story at hand. I'll read the second section of it now. So, the family has moved to the U.S. and they're living in Linda Vista, which is Navy housing. It was Navy housing, and now Southeast Asian refugees live there. It is hot and dusty where we live. Some people think it's dirty, but they don't know much about us. They haven't seen our gardens full of lemongrass, mint, cilantro, and basil. Driving by with their windows rolled up, they've only seen the pigeons pecking at day-old rice and the skinny cats and dogs sitting in the skinny shade of skinny trees. Have they seen the berries that we pick that turn our lips and fingertips red? How about the small staircase Ba built from our bedroom window to the backyard so I would have a shortcut to the clothesline? How about the great wall of China that snakes like a river from the top of the steep hill off Crandall Street to the slightly curving bottom? Who has seen this? Okay. Let's see. When the photograph came, Ma and Ba got into a fight. Ba threw the fish tank out the front door and Ma broke all the dishes. They said they never should have got together. Ma's sister sent her the photograph from Vietnam. It came in a stiff envelope. There was nothing else inside, as if anything more would be pointless. Ma held the photograph in her hands. She started to cry. "Child," she sobbed over and over again. She wasn't talking about me. She was talking about herself. Ba said, "Don't cry. Your parents have forgiven you." Ma kept crying anyway and told him not to touch her with his gangster hands. Ba clenched his hands into tight fists and punched the walls. "What hands? What hands?" he yelled. "Let me see the gangster. Let me see his hands." I see his hands punch, blood. Ma is in the kitchen. She has torn the screen off the window. She is punctuating the pavement with dishes, plates, cups, rice bowls. She sends them out like birds gliding through the sky with nowhere in particular to go, until they crash. Then she exhales, huh, in satisfaction. I am in the hallway gulping air. I breathe in the breaking and the bleeding. When Bob plunges his hands into the fish tank, I detect the subtle tint of blood in water. When he throws the fish tank out the front door, yelling, "Let me see the gangster," I am drinking up the spilt water and swallowing whole the beautiful tropical fish, their brilliant colors gliding across my tongue before they can hit the ground to cover themselves in dirt until only the whites of their eyes remain, blinking at the sun. All the hands are in my throat, cutting themselves on broken dishes, and the fish swim in circles they can't see for all the blood. Ba jumps in his truck and drives away. When I grow up, I'm going to be the gangster we are all looking for. The neighborhood kids are standing outside our house, staring in through the windows and the open door. I'm sure their gossiping mothers have sent them to spy on us. I run out front and dance like a crazy lady, dance like a fish, wiggle my head and whip my body around. At first they laugh, but then they stop, not knowing what to think. Then I stop to stare them down, each one of them. "What are you looking at?" I ask. "Looking at you," one boy says, half giggling. "Well," I say with my hand on my hip, my head cocked to one side, "I'm looking at you too." And I give him my evil one-eyed look, focusing all my energy into my left eye. I stare at him hard as if my eye is a bullet and he can be dead. I turn my back on them and walk into the house. Ma is sitting in the window frame. The curve of her back is inside the bedroom while the rest of her body hangs outside on the first of the steps Ba built from the bedroom to the garden. Without turning to look at me, she says, "Let me lift you into the attic." "Why?" "We have to move your grandparents in." I don't really know what she is talking about, but I say okay anyway. We have never needed the attic for anything. In fact, we have never gone up there. When we moved my grandparents in, Ma simply lifted me up, and I pushed open the attic door with one hand, while with the other I slipped the stiff envelope with the photograph of my grandparents into the crawl space above. I pushed the envelope the length of my arm and down to my fingertips. I pushed it so far it was beyond reach. Ma said that was all right. They had come to live with us, and sometimes you don't need to see or touch people to know they're there. When the eviction notice came, we didn't believe it, so we threw it away. It said we had a month to get out. The houses on our block had a new owner who wanted to tear everything down and build better housing for the community. It said we were priority tenants for the new complex, but we couldn't afford to pay the new rent, so it didn't matter. The notice also said that if we didn't get out in time, all our possessions would be confiscated in accordance with some section of a law book or manual we were supposed to have known about but had never seen. We couldn't believe the eviction notice, so we threw it away. The fence is tall, silver, and see-through. Chain link, it rattles when you shake it and wobbles when you lean against it. It circles our block like a bad dream. It is not funny like the clothesline, whose flying shirts and empty pants suggest human birds and vanishing acts. This fence presses sharply against your brain. We three stand still as posts, looking at it, then at one another, this side and that, out of the corners of our eyes. What are we thinking? At night we come back with 3 uncles. Ba cuts a hole in the fence and we step through. Quiet, we break into our own house through the back window. Quiet, we steal back everything that is ours. We tumble out the window like people tumbling across continents. We are time traveling, weighed down by heavy furniture and bags of precious junk. We find ourselves leaning against Ba's yellow truck. Ma calls his name, her voice reaching like a hand, feeling for a tree trunk in darkness. In the car, Ma starts to cry. "What about the sea?" she asks. "What about the garden?" Ba says we can come back in the morning and dig up the stalks of lemongrass and fold the sea into a blue square. Ma is sobbing. She is beating the dashboard with her fists. I want to know, she says, I want to know who is doing this to us. Hiccuping, she says, I want to know why. Why there's always a fence. Why there's always someone on the outside wanting something on the inside, and between them this sharp fence. Why are we always leaving like this? Everyone is quiet when Ma screams. Take me back, she says. I can't go with you. I've forgotten my mother and father. I can't believe, Admin, we've left them to die. Take me back. Ma wants Ba to stop the car, but Ba doesn't know why. The three uncles, sitting in a row in the bed of the truck, think Ma is crazy. They yell in through the rear window, May, are you going to walk back to Vietnam? Yeah, are you going to walk home to your parents' house? In the silence, another shakes his head and reaches into his shirt pocket for his cigarettes. Ba puts his foot on the gas pedal. Our car jerks forward and then plunges down the Crandall Drive hill. Ma says, I need air, water. I roll the window down. She puts her head in her hands. She keeps crying, child. In the morning, the world is flat. Westinghouse Street is lying down like a jagged brushstroke of sunburnt yellow. There's a big sign within the fence that reads, Coming soon, condominiums, townhouses, family homes. Below these words is a copy of a watercolor drawing of a large pink complex. We stand on the edge of the chain-link fence, sniffing the air for the scent of lemongrass, scanning this flat world for our blue sea. A wrecking ball dances madly through our house. Everything has burst wide open and sunk down low. Then I hear her calling them. She is whispering, Ma ba, ma ba. The whole world is two butterfly wings rubbing against my ear. Listen. They are sitting in the attic, sitting like royalty, shining in the dark, buried by a wrecking ball, paper fragments floating across the surface of the sea. There's not a trace of blood anywhere, except here, in my throat, where I am telling you all this.